Hey everybody, welcome back to One Seed, One World. So it's a kind of a breezy December day out here, and this might be a strange time to be talking about gardening, but I wanted to do some videos this winter on things that might help you get prepared for your 2024 gardening season. And we will cover things on different diseases to look out for, maybe different varieties to try, but on today's video, we are going to talk about the differences between heirlooms and hybrids, pros and cons of each, and kind of to help you determine the difference between the two and what might work best for you in your garden. So let's get into it. Okay, let's start off with heirlooms. So what determines what an heirloom garden plant variety might be? Determining what an heirloom is can be as varied as the plants themselves. Some say that seeds for heirlooms need to be at least 100 years old or longer. Not the seed themselves, but the variety of plant needs to have been around for at least 100 years. I don't want you to think that you need to be holding on to seeds for 100 years and think that you'll be able to grow them later. But the plants need to have been around for at least 100 years. That's one school of thought. Now, another one is that they have to be at least 50 years old. Some people say that they need to be at least 50 years old. Others are more in the school of thought that they need to have been around at least since World War II, which is kind of when the hybrid plants started really kind of becoming popular and starting to take shape. And so that anything pre-World War II would be a variety from pre-World War II would be an heirloom, and those that came out afterwards would be a hybrid. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter, I don't think, on whether it's a 100 years old variety, a 50-year-old variety, or a World War II era, pre-World War II era variety. Generally they're older varieties though, at least 50 years old, and go from there. And so the one thing with heirlooms is that they generally have some really cool historical stories with them. They've been around a long time. Some of them might be varieties that are thousands of years old that ancient civilizations use. Some may have been developed like in the 16, 17, 1800s, early 1900s maybe. And depending on which type of plant that you get that is an heirloom, I guarantee you there will be some sort of cool historical story built into there. I've done a couple of things on, or a couple of videos on different historical stories like the fish peppers. I did a little bit on dill seeds and things like that. But even within the different varieties, there then are, or different species, there's different varieties that each have their own individual stories as well. And so that's a lot of the cool thing about gardening, is that you can learn about how these plants came to be. And that's a big thing behind heirlooms, is they have a very storied history in most cases. Now, what are some of the pros and cons of a heirloom variety? Well, like we just talked about, heirlooms have a historical story that go along with them most of the time. But they also tend to be more flavorful than, like, say, a hybrid variety. They've taken on characteristics over time that tend to be more flavorful, and they also a lot of times can be more localized. Like, there'll be certain varieties that have adapted over time to the region where they have been grown and will function or grow best in those particular areas. Now, they can be planted in other regions, of course, but they might have some localized benefits. So if you can plant heirlooms that kind of started from your local area, they might do better than, like, say, if you have a plant that was from I don't know, New Hampshire, and has always kind of been in New Hampshire for the last 200 years, you might get a better plant growing it in New Hampshire than you would if you grew it in Georgia. Just those kinds of things. Also, heirloom seeds can be more, they can, a lot of times are cheaper than a hybrid variety, so they can be more cost efficient. Now, cons. The one problem with heirlooms is a lot of times they're not as resistant to diseases. I know with some of the heirloom varieties that I grow, a good example would be Cherokee Purple, the tomato variety. Delicious tomato, but it tends to succumb to more fungal blights and wilts and stuff, has things like cat facing, and runs into other issues that maybe a hybrid would not run into. It can get diseases faster. They also might not be as productive, or the production of the plant may vary by quite a bit, either from year to year, or from plant to plant, or from region to region. They don't have a consistent production. So your friend might get a Cherokee Purple tomato and grow it and gets, just tons and tons of tomatoes, and you might grow that same plant or same variety, that same Cherokee type purple plant, and don't get hardly any. So there's not a consistent amount of production all the time with heirlooms. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about hybrids now. What exactly are hybrids? Hybrids, sorry, this wind is really getting to my hair here. Hybrids are varieties that have been cross-pollinated to get the best attributes from the two parent plants. Now, it's something that can happen naturally in nature. Just cross-pollination happens all the time in nature. Generally with seeds that are hybrids, that different varieties that you would buy from the store, they have been specifically cross-pollinated and kind of grown in a controlled environment to harvest these seeds so that they can take on the best traits of the parent plants that they were cross-pollinated from. And this a lot of times will take several generations. It's gotten faster than it used to be when people first started doing this, but it could take several generations of plants. And so it's kind of a longer process before you get the best plant that then they would then start getting seeds from. And they're more disease resistant. They have more consistent production. So these are some of the pros of getting plants that are hybrids, and these are ones that you would commercially buy. Now, cross-pollination and hybridization happens in nature all the time as well. If you plant two squash plants next to each other of two different varieties, but that are within the same species, as bumblebees and other things, honeybees and birds or whatever, cross-pollinate the plants, sometimes you might get a weird mix. I've had that happen where I planted some kabocha squash and a lemon squash right next to each other. I saved the seeds from the kabocha squash, but the next year when I planted them, I got some weird amalgamation of a mix of the lemon squash and the kabocha squash that did not turn out to be very good. And so in some cases, the cross-pollination with that hybrid that you get afterwards might not always be a good thing. You might not get a very good edible produce out of it after the fact. And so when you're buying commercial seeds, though, they have done specific crossbreeds over time to get you the best produce. And it's all a natural process, but they've kind of worked them through. And that way you're getting the best produce at the end. So that's some of the benefits of the hybrids, is that they have been bred to be more disease resistant, to have better production, and kind of more consistent maybe size and whatnot. Now, some of the cons are a hybrid might not be as flavorful. I can tell you that a hybrid tomato is not going to taste as good as a heirloom tomato. There's just more juiciness, meatiness, flavor that is in an heirloom that you most likely are not going to get out of a hybrid. There are some really good hybrids, and I'm not trying to knock hybrids. I'm just saying that overall, in general, your heirloom is going to taste better than a hybrid, because the hybrid is being bred to last longer, produce more, survive those diseases. And sometimes hybrid seeds will cost a little bit more too, so they might not be as cost effective. Now, between the two, coming down to saving seeds, an heirloom, one of the characteristics is that they're open pollinated, which means that open pollination is they are pollinated by bees, birds, and wind. And they transfer around, and it's all open pollinated, works very well. You can save the seeds, and they will take on the characteristics of the parent plant. Whereas with hybrids, sometimes they're not always open pollinated. The seeds may not be as viable when you save them, or if they are as viable, they might not take on all the characteristics of the parents. You might get some other new thing out of them, because they, again, the hybridization is about making an overall better plant with production and disease resistance in the first year that it grows. After that, you can save the seeds, you'll get a lot of those characteristics, but they might not always be as consistent. And so that can be a con to saving hybrid seeds versus heirloom seeds. One final note is that sometimes I've seen online and in forums and stuff where it seems like there is some confusion when it comes to hybrid varieties and GMO. Hybrid and GMO are not the same thing. Hybrid varieties are things that will occur naturally in nature. With commercial hybrid seeds, they are getting help from humans to kind of, like I said, narrow down some of those good traits, but they are from the same species, and they are cross-pollinated between the same species, which would happen in nature anyway. And as I mentioned, you can get cross-pollination in your garden every year. It happens. GMOs are not the same because they require additional scientific stuff to make them pollinate. Sometimes, they are mixed with, sometimes it's synthetic or cells or whatnot from other species that would not occur naturally in nature to kind of draw traits out. Like they've used, I think, cells from fish to go crossbreed with like a wheat cell or a corn cell. I mean, I'm not saying it's fish specifically, I'm just using that as an example. But a fish and a variety of corn in nature would never happen naturally. And so scientists have been working on different ways to make certain crops be more viable, survive better in drought conditions, stand up to pesticides, all kinds of other things that wouldn't happen naturally in nature. And that's why generally, your general gardener like myself, I'm not a proponent of GMO because it's not a naturally occurring thing. I want to stick with what could happen in nature naturally without injecting it with something else. Granted, there might be some good things that could come out of it, but we haven't been doing GMO long enough to know what the cons might be, and maybe they grow really well in drought places, but who knows what it's doing to your body later. I don't know. I'm not getting into all that right now. I'm just saying hybrid and GMO are not the same thing. Hybrid, naturally occurring, okay, same species. GMO, not okay, not same species, would never happen naturally in nature. So then, that's kind of the rundown of heirlooms and hybrids and the differences between the two, and the pros and cons. But what do you choose for your garden? Do you go with the more consistent things that come from a hybrid, or do you go with heirlooms for maybe some additional flavor and for the history? You can do both. You don't have to necessarily stick to one or the other. Both have their benefits, both have their cons. So do a mix of both. Find varieties that you like, try different things, work around the things you have to mitigate with the heirlooms, with some of the diseases and stuff, and try some hybrids as well, where you're getting higher production or more disease resistant. Maybe you can, have a hybrid section of your garden and an heirloom section of your garden. Compare how your production goes. These are cool tests to do when you are out there gardening. But there's tons of choices now that you can do between the both, and they both have all kinds of cool things that you can try with them and learn from them. So that's everything that I have today about heirlooms and hybrids, and I hope that you found that information helpful. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. I'll be doing more things to help you plan for the 2024 garden, or you can check out some of my past videos on chickens, bees, build projects, and lots of other gardening content that you might find helpful. So I appreciate that you're here hanging out with me again today. Whatever's going on in your neck of the woods, I hope it's fantastic for you and that you are staying warm this winter and already preparing for your 2024 garden. We'll see you again soon. Have a great day. Namaste.